about that a lot. Lesson 1, we have to do something to elevate the status of this profession. And we hear so much about, well, the media is making us look bad and so on, they're taking things out of context. The only people who can really fix it are us. The reality is that people with a microphone are usually the people who scream the loudest, and we can't let that happen. There has to be a way for us to elevate the status. And improving teacher education programs is one way, but if we talk about what's going on in one school district, we have a lot of control over that as well. There are amazing things happening, like New Dawn, for example. Here are young people. How many hours a week do you think they spend developing that talent? Why don't you turn the person next to you and try and figure out how many hours a week they work on it. Please talk to them. Go. All right, folks, I'm not quite sure, but I know it's a lot. And here's what I see going on. You have young people who have gone through a school system, and somewhere along the line, they have figured out that they have a tremendous talent for something. They've had chances to develop that. And then they do their very, very best, but there has to be a way to help that to stand out in a community. And that be a reflection of our schools, other than what so often comes up in the newspapers, what comes up in the news. And so when our kids do their very best to make sure that the doors are open and more people know about that, we have to do whatever we can to elevate the status of teachers. Okay? Another lesson, this is lesson number 2 of planes. I spoke to a gentleman recently whose job it is to evaluate pilots. He used to be a pilot for an airline, and now it's his job to do this. And he said, to tell you the truth, there's basically 2 types of pilots. First group is the group that I can tell that they love what they do. They go through the pre-flight check and they're excited about it. They're excited to take off down the runway and take off up through the clouds. They love skimming across the clouds. Heck, they even love landing because they're so excited about the next time to fly. They do what they're asked to do the right way, but they're excited about that. He says, that's my type A of pilot. He said, the hardest part of my job is really this, that I have another group, which are my type B type of pilots. They do everything that's correct, and for that reason, he certifies them and endorses them, but they seem to have lost that love of flying. He said to them, it's no longer an adventure, an opportunity, it's just a job. I thought, that's flying. Do you know what every young kid dreams about? I have 4 boys. How many boys do I have? They want to be one of 3 things: a fireman, a pilot, or a garbage man. Okay? For whatever the reason, I know why the pilot. And that's because that's the coolest thing in the world. Can you imagine being a pilot and not being excited about it? And as I thought about that, I thought, you know what? As I visit with folks, when I go from school to school, this is what I see, is a polarization of education. You have people that kind of pull away from each other, that there is a group of teachers that have so much fun with their kids, it's hard to tell who's having more fun, the students or the teachers. But that's not always the case. And to give you an example, walked into a classroom. This was a language arts classroom. Can you please show me your feelings about language arts when I say that word with your fingers? This is, no way. Again, ready, set, go. Yes, good son, that's my son. You ready? You have to understand that very few kids walk into language arts like, yay, it's language arts. Now I walked into a classroom, just play along. If you don't look at your neighbor, this will be a lot better. What's rule number 1? Don't look at your neighbor. All right, I walked into a classroom and I said, I'm the teacher of the year, what are you doing today? And she looked at me and she said, Now those of you who are married, that's code for what? That's right, I'm not interested in your opinion. Sit down, I'm going to show you something, Mr. Teacher of the Year. She said, well actually we're teaching Animal Farm. It's the connection between Rasputin and the Romanov family. And I'm thinking, she's going to be asking for my input. Because I'm bored already, just listening to this stuff. And I see the slides, I'm like, this is going to bomb. And I walk in, and her 9th grade students are coming in. What grade are they? Everybody stand up. You're now in what grade? Stand up. You'll be okay. Don't look at your neighbor. That's rule number 1. Now, you participate as much as you want to. This is what's going to happen. We're coming into class. Do what's in the middle of the screen. If you want to get really, really neat about this, look in the bottom right-hand corner for what's coming next. Everybody point. Where are we going to look? If we know what we're doing? Middle of the screen. If we want to see what's coming next, where are we going to go? What? Okay, right. Here we go. Go ahead. Don't look at your neighbor. Do not look at your neighbor. Oh, it gets easier. All right, have a seat. point, the bell has already rung. And guess what the kids are still doing? They're still going. She doesn't care. Now, who were they singing about? Does anybody know? The lesson she was trying to teach was a connection between the Romanovs and who? Rasputin. The name of the song is Ra Ra Rasputin. That's who it's named after. And so I come in, and the kids are doing this, and they're all over the place. And she goes, all right, you know what we're going to learn about today? And I said, no, but it's going to be cool. She's like, absolutely. We're going to talk about the connection between Rasputin and the Romanov family. She hands out these song lyrics, and she says, I need you to mark this, this, and this. That's on your test. Cross off this and this. This never happened. Add in this, this, and this. Talked about this. She said, now, what questions do you have about Rasputin and the Romanov family? You think that's a little different than what your experience was like in school? I know it was different from my language arts classroom. So when I went back to my own kids, guess what book I wanted to teach? The Animal Farm. And I can kind of remember that in high school, but it wasn't like that. That's a Camp A teacher. No, stop. Now, if that's Camp A, what does Camp B look like, right? Well, it's kind of the antithesis. It's a teacher who's not able to figure out what would most engage my students. What would they really be into? Take a look at their technology and see how to connect with them. Camp B, usually I talk about Camp B, I take my boys with me. I have them on a rotation basis. They come with me. Count three, say, oh, 1, 2, 3. Oh, there you go, all right? These are my education consultants. These are the people that I talk to the most about what's going well and what's not going well in schools. And I take them with me when I visit school districts, because when I get up and say, there are 3 things we need to fix, everybody's like, yeah, I wish there was dessert. When they talk, guess what people do? You get a young kid up and say, this is what I like about school and this is what I don't like. You take that seriously. These are some of the things they talk about. This is Kale. What's his name? This is Kale after our little event where he got up and spoke to 600 educators and administrators trying to suck his milkshake through a straw and through a French fry. I said, Kale, that's never going to work. He goes, oh yeah, there's holes in the French fry. For 5 minutes, he sucked and sucked and sucked. He'd gone from white to blue to purple to... And I said, what are you doing? He goes, I've got it, look! And he swore that he had done it. He's in kindergarten. That's what he goes into school with. That sort of willingness to be innovative, to break molds, to be excited and have fun. He gets up and he says, this is what I like about schools. Guess what he says he doesn't like about schools? Do you want to tell him? Why don't you turn to the people next to you? There are 3 things he says I don't like. Can you tell those 3 things to the people next to you? Go. All right, who can give me one? Remember, he's in kindergarten. He's been in kindergarten not that long. He says, one thing I don't like is sitting still, being quiet. There's one more. Worksheets. That's all 3. That's what he says. Kindergarten. So he comes to kindergarten, and after a little while, he's already worrying about what? Being told to sit still, be quiet, and here's a worksheet. This is a book we've read together. This is Max Goes to Mars. Kale, if you were here, he'd share this. This is his Mars rover. Notice it looks like an eagle from left to right, okay? He gets up and he talks about the changes he would make to the Mars rover. These wheels that'll help it get unstuck. Underneath it look like French fries. Those will push it up out of the sand. I said, why are you so worried about getting stuck in the sand? He goes, Dad, don't you know anything about the Mars rover? It always gets stuck in the sand. I said, what's that thing at the top? He goes, Dad, that's to shoot the people out. So they've gathered all these rocks and these pictures. They need to take it back to Earth. I said, son, there are no people in the Mars rover. He said, Dad, there should be. That's what a young man's mind does when he comes to school. But when he comes to school, he's told often to do what? What 3 things? Be quiet, sit still, here's a worksheet. Okay, this is Cade. KU fan, despite the walloping they got today, but that's okay. Now, Cade and Kason and some other sons helped me make this. We have an astronaut costume. But they said the only thing that an astronaut costume needs is what? Is a helmet. We made this out of old soccer balls and duct tape. This is the kind of stuff they get to do at home, but when they go to school... This is Kason. Kason, can you wave real quick? Kason was all excited about this costume. It's an alien costume. It came with a mask. I think we got it for like $8 the day after Halloween in Walmart. My wife's awesome and stuff like that. So we're all excited to wear it to the church, trunk or treat. Right? Problem is, for some reason, so the little kids don't get scared or something, there's a rule for that night. You can't wear a mask. So now Kason's got this great costume, but he can't wear his mask. So technically, if you turn yourself into a 2-headed alien, it's not a mask, is it? We've got divergent thinking, innovation, creativity. But he would share as well. When I go to school, people spend a lot of time telling me what 3 things? Be quiet, sit still, there's worship. Okay? Those are my educational consultants. And that's one of the last things I could share with you is we spend so much time listening to teachers and teacher leaders. We should spend a lot more time listening to who, folks? Because they're as concerned about it as we are. Okay? First lesson was lessons from the lawn. Second one was lessons from the airplane. Last one is lessons from the cruise. Right? We had a young man who was very excited to take a cruise. All teachers dream of going on cruises. Do you know why? Because we can't afford it. That's right. This is what we want to. We had a young man, and he was a teacher, and he saved all his money to go on a cruise. He wanted to sail the Mediterranean, and he wanted to see Istanbul, Rome, most beautiful cities around. Well, he gets on the boat, and he realizes there's all this fun stuff going on. Anybody been on a cruise? They're amazing things. I've heard about that. I've been told. There are pools, there are parties, there's miniature golf. They had this one that had like a surf wave that was on the deck of the ship. They have cultural presentations. They have fantastic food. And as he got on the ship, he realized, if I spend my money on this stuff, I'm not going to have enough money for Rome and Istanbul. And so he did what any smart teacher would do. He brought a little suitcase, and in that suitcase he put powdered lemonade, crackers, and canned beans. And so the entire cruise, guess what he lived off of? He walked by the pool, walked by the shows, and he wanted to sample that food, but instead, because of the financial situation, he focused on his canned beans, his powdered lemonade, and his saltine crackers. Very last day of the cruise, he got up there and he was walking around, just admiring, saying, it's almost time for Istanbul, Rome. And when the staff members came up to him and said, hey, which of the farewell parties are you going to attend? And he explained his predicament about finances. And it was then that he figured out and was told that everything on the cruise, the parties, the pool, the cultural presentations, and the feast were all what, folks? Free. Yeah, the teachers haven't been on a cruise ship. That's right. And it was then that he realized that for too long he had been living beneath his means. When I look at education, that's what I worry about. Because what typically happens is that when we're under times of financial stress, areas of limited resources, we have a tendency to pull inward and just grab and say, I can't do this because. And that's my big worry, is as I've gone from school to school, there are Camp A teachers that are doing it. But there are also Camp B teachers, and too often you hear, if we'd only have a little more, but they've cut back on. And too often I find teachers that are teaching beneath their means, which means our students are now learning what? Beneath their means. And that's one of the lessons we get from cruise ships. Lesson number 1 was what? Lessons from lawn. Turn to somebody next to you and tell them the one lesson from the lawn. Go. Remember that one? There are beautiful spots in Kansas. What's the lesson from the lawn? There's still work to be done. One more time. What's the lesson? Still work to be done. Next one. The plane. 2 lessons. Turn to somebody next to you and tell them the 2 lessons of the plane.
Be quiet.
Yeah, be quiet and sit still, she said. Alright, remember the first story was me being terrified on the plane. And what was the guy's reaction? So the first task we have based on the plane is to elevate what? Status of teaching. And as much as that's going against us on the media, who's in charge of that? Here we are. Other lesson on the plane was what? What's that? That's right, that's right. That we have these 2 camps of teachers, these evaluators, and we can really work on that as well. The pilot evaluation story taught us that under any circumstances we tend to polarize. So we have to depolarize education so we don't have Camp A and Camp B anymore. Last one is the cruise ship. Turn to somebody next to you and tell you that. All right. Era of limited resources. I realize this, but too often it's tempting to do what? What was in the suitcase, folks? Can you tell me? Beans, lemonade, saltine crackers. Even in this area where it seems like there's a little less, we still can do more. And that's my lesson tonight. Thank you so much for having me.